Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Chennai Chess Olympiad. Today we have the penultimate round of action, which is round number 10 of 11. And oh my goodness, folks, this was a round to remember. This was one of the most epic rounds of, excuse me, I'm taking my phone out of my pocket. I've got to be all nice and free to move around for this recap because this was one of the most epic rounds of an Olympiad of any tournament that I've ever seen. I got nothing else to say. That's it. That's the whole intro. I hope you enjoyed today's video. We're gonna obviously give you a little 2-3 minute rundown of Magnus. Magnus actually is playing Ivan Skitko or Shitko, and this is an individual that I played recently. I played this gentleman in a tournament in New York City. It's pretty crazy seeing this matchup. Magnus plays a King's Indian attack, playing kind of a very odd d3, a4 kind of a thing with like e4. It's not really the loss of a pawn. Opening up this bishop is a little bit too much for black. And, you know, Ivan just plays normal moves. I mean, he just finishes his development, and Magnus kind of starts doing typical King's Indian attack things by playing things like h4. White will probably at some point rotate the knight over to g4. Black oftentimes will create counterplay on the queen side and down the middle. And so Magnus locks the center, brings back the bishop to c1, covers any sort of infiltration spots on the queen side, and you can kind of see here he's sort of building up an attack with like rook f1. Obviously, it's a very locked position. I mean, it's been 20 moves, and they haven't traded anything. Okay, they've traded bishops, but now they haven't really traded anything. And, you know, Magnus at some point will probably build something up and break through, right? He's Magnus Carlsen. That's sort of what he does. Ivan plays h5, pushes back the knight, and he's just sort of waiting. I mean, he's waiting for Magnus to make a breakthrough, and you can kind of see from the evaluation of Stockfish that it does have the blessing, right? It's giving the blessing. It's sort of saying that, you know, he's done the right thing. But Ivan's like, all right, I'm not going to sit around and wait for Magnus to steamroll me. f6, let's go. Like, let's go. I'm going to take this knight. That knight no longer has any pressure. And now e5. Get back, right? Bishop d2, queen d7, f3. But where's the attack now? I mean, Magnus sets up the whole pawn structure, but black just plays knight b7, and any way that white is going to try to push forward here, he's going to be conceding something. So he trades like this, and then when he's finally prepared, he plays the move g4. The players reach move 40, both of them, but black correctly evaluates that queen takes g4 is the right thing. That is not losing a knight, because there is a direct attack on the king here, and Magnus plays bishop g5, but it's just perpetual. Magnus is unable to get anything playing this kind of King's Indian attack against Ivan Shitko, and my former opponent, Drew Magnus. This is crazy. This is insane. Huge congratulations to him. I mean, my God, he's had quite an Olympiad. He's the board one for Moldova, and he's drawn like a bunch of 26 and 2700. So great job to him. Norway loses. Norway lost on the bottom two boards in this match. And I think Jon Ludwig won on board two, but they go down to Moldova 2.5, 1.5. Norway's had a rough event. And before I cover the most important games, I just want to give like a small public service announcement. Johan Sebastian Christensen of the team of Norway made a post on Twitter, and it was in Norwegian. It was like roughly translated, but basically he's been receiving just horrible messages, it seems, because of his poor performance. And all I want to say about that is chess is not like other sports in the sense that our athletes have millions of followers and have social media teams and, like, you know, are just these untouchable celebrities. Many professional chess players who are 25, 2600, even 2700 manage all their own stuff. They're very easily accessible, it seems, on DMs, on social media. And if you are going out of your way to be a hateful individual because of a poor performance, that's just disgusting behavior. That says far more about you than it does about them and their poor performance in that event. Don't do that. That's so weird. Even on this channel, when I do Pin of Shame and things like that, and, you know, we have like some crazy trolls here writing, you know, crazy feedback or whatever it might be. This is different. We have a gigantic, overwhelmingly positive community. And if some people act up, it's one thing. That's just gross. Don't DM something to someone that you wouldn't say if they were right there in front of you. All right? Well, you guys are going to, you know, if you behave like that, you're going to learn one day. You're going to learn one day. It does not translate to IRL interactions, all right? So Norway's struggling, it is what it is, but it's time for the battle of the generations. India B is taking on Uzbekistan. This is a matchup of titans. First matchup I have for you is their board 3. Prague versus Javahir Sindarov. Sindarov plays the King's Indian defense, the same exact one he played yesterday against Armenia. Prague comes prepared with a transformation of the structure and begins a queenside expansion, right? You see Prague's knight and bishop over there. H3 is covering knight G4 so that his bishop will happily stand there for the rest of the game. And we have an exchange, and Prague kind of continues improving his position and grabs a pawn. Black plays rook A2. This is a massive decision by Sindarov. Sindarov is essentially saying, my bishop is going here, but you are not going to trap me, all right? The bishop will not be trapped. I have all sorts of tactics in the center, okay? And, you know, good luck. So Prague says, okay, now you don't have any tactics in the center. Where's that bishop going? All right? Remember, Fischer-Spassky, game 1 of their World Championship match. All right, where's that bishop going? You got your hand stuck a little too far in the cookie jar. Queen A5. This game is all about brute force calculation. Queen C6 played by Prague. Get out. Give a check. You got to win some time back. Black makes a move. Now it's white to move again. Queen C2. That bishop is not getting out. Oh, you want my pawn? You want my pawn? Danger levels, E5. I'm attacking your bishop. I'm not just attacking your bishop. If you take this, you attack my queen. But if I take that, I hit your king. It's all about the danger levels, right? You take on E5. Now, while I'm using your bishop as a decoy, I'm going to go after your rook. And I'm going to go here. You're going to struggle to move here. All right? Going to be very difficult. Queen C5. Who's going to guard the bishop? Bishop takes... Oh. But Prague finds this excellent idea. Rook E1, and black is paralyzed. The bishop is hanging. And combined with discovered threats on the queen, on the rook and the king, black is really struggling to defend. The pressure is unstoppable. Black has no moves. The black rook is completely paralyzed. And what happens in a few moves is white finally gets that rook and gets into an endgame of 3 and 3. Now, would Stockfish hold this with black? It really depends. The more pawns on the board, the worse it is for the defending side. If it was rook versus bishop, is a draw if you know how to defend it and if you kind of have the right situation. You have to run the king to the corner opposite the bishop. That's what that's called, wrong bishop, or right bishop, depending on the corner. The more pawns there are on the board, the worse it is. And what happens in this endgame is first the pawns get split, and slowly but surely, we get here. Now, this is winnable, but could be a draw. This could be a draw if the king goes here, and the bishop covers the king. It's called a defensive fortress. Black basically hides, and there's no way to stop the king from getting out of the corner. The problem is this is the wrong starting position. The king is unable to get to the corner, and this is winnable. And so what Prague does is he bullies the king in such a way where he's either going to get checkmated and the bishop is not going to be allowed to cover the king in time, okay? Or what's going to happen is the king runs the other way. Now, I think there was something here, it's again, like if you just go to H8 and try to cover up, there's a way that it doesn't work because white has a certain amount of moves here to get you out of the corner. This is probably the way he should have tried to defend the position, but after something like check, again, the king will either run or black will run out of moves. So there's like a way that white can win this endgame. This is the way you're trying to draw this endgame by putting the king in the wrong corner, but white still has this pawn. And so slowly, that's exactly what he does. He cuts off the king from the corner, and then the right way to win this is that you have to sacrifice the pawn at some point for a winning rook versus bishop endgame. But instead of that, the king never makes it back, and slowly but surely Prague starts pushing, and now it's just totally winning because a combination of a couple of factors here, black resigns. India's up 2-1. Now, perfect game by Prague. I mean, just stockfish level game. It's why it's on the thumbnail. It's also why it's on the thumbnail because Gukesh has been mowing folks down on board 1, and this game was no exception. A Rogozin from Nodirbek Abdusaturov. He plays a sideline variation. Gukesh very solid. Bishop pair, slowly improving his position over the course of the game. We have a clash, and we have a position in the middle game where white has an absolutely dominant situation. White has what's called a protected outside pass pawn. That pawn's a passer. It's a problem in all endgames. This bishop is not participating at all. And around here, if Gukesh had played the move Queen H5, it's +7. Just +7. And the point is that Rook D7 is just coming in, and I mean, there's just no play. Like if black plays G6, Queen G5, and Queen F6, This game's just over. Knight g4. I mean, like, queen h5 wins. Queen g3 is also winning, but Gukesh doesn't play queen h5. Okay, but let's see him convert this advantage. All right, we have probably a much better endgame. All right, white is going to pick up a pawn very soon. White is now a pawn up with the outside pass pawn. That's it. He's just got to convert it. Nodirbek just keeps playing. He's got to make moves. He can't resign, right? Look at this. I mean, the pawn's on a6 now. This is insane. I mean, can somebody stop Gukesh? And suddenly, Nodirbek begins consolidating. All right? The players make it to the time control. It's still -3, but Gukesh does something a bit strange here. And instead of playing something like knight g5 or queen g5, he kind of walks his king into a checking situation. He must have thought he was completely safe, but one inaccuracy suddenly is allowing black to hide his king from danger, and the queen arrived, right? The queen arrived. Suddenly, Nodirbek is back to equality, okay? Nodirbek is now infiltrating the white position with his queen. Position is a complete draw, and there's a repetition of moves here. Like, you can play whatever just happened, right? We just had queen c2, queen g1, you know, queen goes back to c5. Like, you can't do anything here. You just cannot move. You just go back and forth. It's a fortress. Instead of that, Gukesh tries to play for a win, all right? Again, multiple repetitions here. Instead of that, Gukesh goes walking, gives up his g2 pawn. Now, evaluation of the position, still around equality, but it's an insane thing to do. The black king has run out to the side of the board. There's no more checks. There's no more checks. King c5, what is going on? All the pawns are falling. All the pawns are falling. The pawns have completely collapsed. The white king is just hiding from the queen. We have knight e5, check, and apparently in this position, queen a5 is -8 for black. It's just -8. I don't understand, but basically you play bishop f5, and the engine does not see a way to prevent this pawn from going and from the king from being bullied. Stockfish is not even catching up. On a low depth, it's like game over. Nodirbek gives this check and does this. And now Gukesh is back in the game if he plays queen d8 and apparently tries to give a few more checks and then slowly consolidate and advance. And here's something completely insane happens. He plays knight f3 and hangs a fork. He hangs a fork. Just queen b7 wins the knight. The nerves got to him. The pressure, the situation, it all got to him. Nodirbek Abdussaturov, from the depths of defeat, clutches incredible defense. Gukesh was so shocked, he just sat there like with his head in his hands. He didn't even, nothing. I mean, he's just complete shock. His clock hits 0. I mean, you know, Uzbek team captain Ivan Sokolov came and, you know, hugged Nodirbek. It's a crazy, crazy game. A crazy game. The fact that both teams split the match now means Uzbekistan stays in first place. India is unable to eclipse them. And it all comes down to this match, Azerbaijan versus Armenia. Oh man, before we look at this game, I mean, just what a game. Like, the stakes were unbelievably high. What a defensive effort. And it turns out that Gukesh is human after all, just like all of us. It just took 10 rounds to find that out. He was just a bulldozer. But in this game, a series of small inaccuracies leading to this catastrophic blunder at the end. I mean, wow, just, he's human after all. And, you know, there's still room for improvement, but what a fight. This game was really weird, okay? Mamedyarov played this early h4 move. Black is trying to break out on the queen side. Then Mamedyarov sacrifices his pawn to push this pawn to c7. Black plays b4. And then black plays a4 with the intention of playing the move b3. Apparently here, white has to play rook c1. Because if black plays b3, then bishop d6 is very strong, with the idea to, like, obviously get the knight here and win. And if they don't take you, you will take them. And then theory here goes rook a5, bishop e7, rook b5, bishop f8. This is what the engine says, okay? This is what black has to do. Instead of the move rook c1, Mamedyarov plays queen c2, which is a bad move. And in a very spicy position, he blunders this, and now Mamedyarov is completely lost. Mamedyarov is dead lost in 15 moves. What? He played a really spicy line and allowed his opponent to just have a defended pass pawn in the position. All Sarkisyan has to do now is consolidate. He consolidates around the c-pawn, and he just improves the position, trades a few pieces, wins the c-pawn, and he just has a pawn on b3. He just has this pawn Now, of course, it's going to take a little bit of time, but you notice, like, all he's doing is just trading all the pieces. He's just protecting himself, trading the pieces. Mamedyarov thinks his best chances of surviving are in an endgame, and to his credit, Mamedyarov did fight back. Stockfish was giving his position a little bit of a blessing, but Sargsyan, very slowly, just very slowly, improving his position. Finally, the pawn is a runner, right? The pawn's running away. So what do we do when that pawn is lost? We're going to take a couple of pawns to go. This is the closest it got, actually, but the knight just gallops and wins a couple, wins the f-pawn, defends the h-pawn, and it takes over 60 moves. But starting from move 15, just absolute disaster for Azerbaijan. Armenia wins on board 1. Armenia also wins on board 4. Armenia is tied with Uzbekistan for first place going into the final round of the Olympiad. And they've lost to Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan beat them. They have a massive tiebreak lead. If Uzbekistan wins in the final round of the Olympiad, they are the Olympic champions. That's it. I'm pretty sure that's how the tiebreaks work. They are the Olympic champions. Now, there might be a totally massive discrepancy. I don't know. The tiebreaks are always weird in chess, but this is unbelievable. India is 1 point behind them, and now we are going to look at a couple of other teams that are very close. America, United States of America, taking on Turkey. They are looking to get in with India B into that score group. Fabiano Caruana has struggled in this event, but the unfortunate thing for the rest of the world about the American team is that when they play their best, their average rating is 2750. And Fabi in this game is like, all right, it's time to make a statement. He plays a very aggressive variation of the knight orf. Actually, I'm sure this was seen a couple of times in this event. I have vague recollection. Black takes on g5. Very bold decision and tries to fight back on that side of the board. Knight c6. All right, the king hides in the corner on h8, but Fabi wins a pawn. And then Fabi plays knight d7, hitting the rook. Black plays this, attacking the rook on h1, rook c1. And suddenly, black has no defense for anything in this position. Why? Because white is going to go knight e5. You play rook g8. Knight e5 is a threat of a queen and mate. Smothered mate. So suddenly, the position is completely unsalvageable. You take on f8, knight e4. It's a counter fork. But cool, calm, and collected. Rook to e6. You know what's brutal about the move rook to e6? If you take the queen, rook e8, and there's no way to prevent threats on the king. For example, if you play the move h6, I have knight g6, I have rook g1, knight g6, rook g1, and this is mate. If you play the move g6 looking to escape, knight e6 is mate in one move. If you play the move king g8 trying to escape, then I have check, here, check. Hi! Fabiano wins with the lights out move, rook to e6. If rook takes e6, there is no way to stop any of this. Rook e6, rook b8, queen e5, black resigns. And the United States emphatically stopped the run of Turkey in the Olympiad with a win of 3-1. Fabiano says, what? Y'all must have forgot. I'm former #2 in the world. I have the 3rd highest chess rating of any human ever. All right, don't count me out, bozos. Fabiano shows up, US shows up. US is up there with the Indian team, India B. And now one final matchup for you. This matchup had 3 decisive games. Parham Maksudlu on board 1 from Iran defeated Pensala Harikrishna. So it was up to the other Indian boards to do something. And Vidit Gujarati played a Catalan against Amin Tabatabai. It was a main line, a very kind of popular idea. Knight c6, rook b8, b5. Vidit early on traded knights and bishops and basically was just applying pressure in the form of a pawn sacrifice. So if you count the pawns, they are actually in the form of 2 pawn sacrifices. So black has 2 pawns extra, just clean 2 pawns. What does white have? A dream. And also a much better pawn structure. And these pawns are going to be a liability in the endgame, which is why Vidit slowly applied the pressure and transformed the game as such. All right? Look at this. Black is up 2 pawns, but has the worst pawn structure conceivable. Just a bunch of isolated pawns, doubled pawns. And now Vidit brings out his mop and begins cleanup. He's won 2 pawns back, and black still has pawn structure problems. If the A-pawns were to be traded, this is salvageable maybe for black. But Vidit continues to apply pressure throughout this game, wins the A-pawn, so now he just has an isolated A-pawn. That A-pawn might be a huge difference maker. Black structure completely frozen. Vidit continues to apply pressure and gets the game into a winning rook endgame. Why is this a winning rook, well, I should say winnable rook endgame. Stockfish might hold this endgame. It's a winnable rook endgame. There goes Vidit. It's a 3-on-2, very imbalanced endgame. The rook has been cut off, but still trying to get around, right? Rook h1, check here. And it takes Vidit over 50 moves. And it takes, I think on move 47, the final mistake, rook g3. The idea here was that if a6, you would take on f3 and you would stop the pawn in time. Instead of that, instead of rook g3, Tabatabai had to play king h7, which, you know, to try to run the king over there and then try to get over here. I mean, sure, good luck, you know, but Vidit sustained pressure and sealing off of that rook, forcing that rook to go all the way back. 52 moves, but Vidit's first win in this event since round 1. Since round 1, Vidit plays the game of his life. Maybe the game of his career. I don't know. Game of his career was probably beating Vladimir Kramnik, but in terms of importance, this is a huge win because now India A is tied with 16 points. It's Armenia, Uzbekistan, India A, India B, USA. Those are the top 5 teams right now, all separated by 1 point, going into the final round. US, I think they've all also played each other, so it's going to be a total chaos. Total chaos. Let me actually check live as we're recording this if the pairings are out. They are not. Pairings are not out. I don't know who's going to play who. Maybe at the end of the recording, we will have some pairings. Let's jump over to the women's section. We have a giant tie. India, Kazakhstan, Poland, Georgia, Ukraine knocking on the door. It was board 1 matchup between Indian women's team and Kazakhstan women's team. Tanya Sajdev in this event is 7 out of 9. She is undefeated. She has played every game. And in this game, she plays her normal, typical stuff. Bishop g5 variation of the Vienna. Black hangs on to the c4 pawn. And we get an extremely crazy variation. White sacks the knight, but is going to win that knight back. a4. All right. Rook b8 played by Black. Takes. Very sharp line. I mean, very sharp line. Tanya is a calm player. She likes to play kind of positional, relaxed games, so at some point, things will slow down here maybe, and she will get back to her style, right? Castles, bishop b5, position is still very sharp. And suddenly, it sort of chills out. Black has no more real threats. If Black doesn't adjust to the changing style of this position, they're going to get in trouble, all right? Black plays rook d8, creating another threat, but Tanya here has knight c5, which apparently gives White an overwhelming crushing advantage. The point is, it's all of this sharp stuff, like rook a5, apparently, and if you take, there's like rook b5, but there's also bishop f6. Crazy position, okay? Tanya plays it solid. She plays bishop e3. She just defends the pawn. Black plays knight d5, knight c5, and position is sort of stabilizing. Queen c1. But the problem is that after this exchange, Black pinned himself, all right? And Tanya correctly identifies that this bishop is not truly defended and can be used as a target to get into the Black position. And even though Tanya's a more positional and potentially relaxed player, she does not shy away from tactics. Boom. Knight e6. Bishop d5, removing the defense of the bishop on e7, and that's it. Overwhelming threats. The king is hunted out into the open, and Tanya wins, and not just Tanya, 3 of the 4 boards of India won, a blowout in the penultimate round, 3.5 out of 4 versus Kazakhstan. India back on top, competing for that gold medal. There was a draw on board 2 between Poland and Georgia. It was 2-2, it was back and forth, and another team has arrived. The winner of the matchup between Germany and Ukraine will also be knocking on that door. We have a very strange transposition from a ready to an English to a d4, a Slav defense by Black, a Schlechter, but also kind of a Grunfeld? I don't know. Kind of a Grunfeld, but it's also not quite a Schlechter because e3, I don't know, whatever, doesn't matter. Very imbalanced, right? Kind of now looks like a Grunfeld. Black creating counterplay with c5, White blocks the dark squared bishop, and Black is going to try to create a blockade here in the center of the light squares, right? Rook c8, all right, there it is. Maybe bishop d5 is on the way as well, just for a good blockade. And, you know, you can kind of tell White is struggling to break through. White is sort of being blockaded. And this is a very important game because all other games in the match have ended in draws. So the winner of this game will have to, will lead their team to victory. But there's no way through really for either side. It's zeros, 25 moves into the game. White continues to push. Black fights back on the queen side. White tries to fight back on the queen side. Queen a5. a3, bishop b3. Suddenly, d5. Whoa! That's a pawn sacrifice. Bishop takes, but black doesn't take. Black tries to hit the bishop on d3. We have takes, bishop c5, queen c5, and white is still pushing. The problem is bishop takes c2, and this is lost. Like, the knight is just taken. You can give a check, but the king will hide. Umbrella pawn. You use your enemy's pawn as a shield, and as the time control is nearly reached, white resigns. White just doesn't have an attack here. Bishop d1, queen g6, one move away from mate, but black will just take the bishop. Black has way too much material. So black will give back the rook for the bishop. There will be no checkmate, and that's it. And Ukraine jumps up as well. And going into this final round, I mean, it is insane. I think there's also 4 teams. I'm gonna confirm that real quick for you. It's India in first place by 1 point, I think, and it's Ukraine, Poland, Azerbaijan, and Georgia 1 point behind. And I think India is going to be playing against the United States, because last I checked, they haven't played each other yet. So yeah, this is going to be an insane final day, and looking forward to it. 2 more games I have to show you from this round, which were just sort of absurd games. If you made it this far in the video, you are very much appreciated. By the way, storylines, Connor Murphy was finally stopped. He lost with the white pieces, actually, to Nico Georgiadis from Switzerland. And Olivia Kielbasa also drew her, or actually, she drew, I think, in her match. So she was stopped in her match in Poland. Yeah, she drew. So, I mean, still a great score. Just those storylines have been put on pause for now. This was a matchup between Hungary and Ukraine, the men's side. And it was a knight d7 Sicilian against bishop b5 check. Here, I've never seen the move knight takes d4, ever. Legitimately never. I mean, I've just seen queen d4. That's sort of the whole point of not having the knight on c6. But okay, a weird Sicilian, very weird Sicilian. And then white played c4, and then played rook a3. I've never seen any of this. Black fought back and then was like, isn't this just a free pawn? And Victor Erdos was like, well, you know what? You want a free pawn, Anton? Take a second free pawn. Come on, take a second free pawn. You want it so bad, and now I have my bishop open. Anton Korobov's like, all right, it's 2 free pawns. I mean, free pawn, right? The bishop is hit now. This is defended. White now gives a check. Bishop a4 is an interesting move, because if knight takes a4 is played, white plays queen a4 and then takes this and gets 2 pieces for the rook. So something like bishop e4, queen e4. Actually, white is just better. For that reason, black plays the top engine move, which is king e7, and apparently black is better. I mean, it's equal-ish, but black is, black is up 2 pawns and chilling. White plays bishop c2, attacking the knight on e4. Now what black has to do here is play knight back to f6. And just be up 2 pawns. Instead of that, black plays the move f5, which does defend the knight. Except it doesn't. Why is it +5? White to play and win, folks. I'm gonna sip some water. It's hot. The knight is not guarded because you can just take it and then take it a second time and bishop g5. Completely insane. What? We don't see mistakes like this at this level, but people are tired. People are tired, man. I don't know. People are tired. People got other things on their mind. It's crazy. And queen c7, and that stops bishop g5, but white just plays rook c3, attacking the queen, and Korobov just resigns. Unbelievable. And I think Hungary beats Ukraine in the end. It's just a kind of a removing the defender tactic, right? Like, just, I don't know. I don't know. Well, parents, you can close your kids' ears, but shit happens, I guess. Right? I mean, that's what my mom used to tell me when I was 10 or 11. You know, they'll learn one day. Your kids will learn one day. Don't worry. I almost never curse on YouTube. Twitch a little bit more. A little less family friendly. What? Right? I mean, if you ask your parents, they'll explain what that saying means. Funny story time. Before I show you the last game of the recap, I'm gonna tell you a 30-second story. I know you don't care. You want to watch the games, but I don't care. I want you to listen to my story. So when I was growing up, my mom used to, if something was bothering her, she'd say pain in the ass, right? Pain in the ass. But I was a little kid. I thought she was saying pain in the S, like the letter S. I didn't know what she was saying because I was a kid. So one day I go to school, I'm like 8 years old, and I drop something and say, oh, it's such a pain in the ass. And my teacher was like, what? Don't say that. I was like, oh my God, what has my mom been saying all these years? Told you, 30-second story. All right, we are going to move on to the matchup between France and Lithuania, and we are talking about Paulius. God help me, I tried to look up how to say his last name. Is it like Pultinevicius? Something like that. It's not Pultinevicius. It's like Pultinevicius or something like that. I've seen him play a lot. I've also played him in Blitz a lot. This matchup had 4 decisive games, if I'm not mistaken. And Lithuania has been having a crazy event. So this was a Tal variation of the Caro-Kann. And Maxime Lagarde is one of the most interesting players from France. I mean, he's always playing crazy openings, aggressive chess. I've seen his games. He sacrificed his b2 pawn early, which is pretty common for these positions. Then he sacrificed a second pawn. So you can't take this because your queen is hanging. But he played bishop b3, and early on he was just down 2 pawns. Just 2 pawns down. But he plays f4. Knight comes in, queen e1. He's giving up a 3rd pawn. He's giving up a 3rd pawn with the idea to play f5. Black does not take the 3rd pawn, plays bishop f5 instead, plays d5. Trying to sacrifice the 3rd pawn. He's trying to get his opponent to take the 3rd pawn anyway. It's impossible to take it though, because this opens up the queen. This opens up knight b5 and bishop a4. So you can't take with the rook because you lose the rook. You can't take with the knight because you lose the rook. So d5 is a crazy move. f6 fighting back. Knight f5, ef5. And the better of the opening has been gotten by Maxime Lagarde, who just has a dominant attack. His opponent gets a queen trade, but the pawn has taken both pawns back and has gone to b7, all right? Which wasn't even the best move. Apparently here, white should have played rook f3. Can I explain why? No. Thank God I don't have to. cb7, the rook has been captured. Okay, material is currently +5 for black, but black has no development, and white here, instead of taking this, goes knight b5. Creating various threats on the king, because the king is obviously cut off. White wants to play bishop e6, knight c7, and kill the king with his bare hands. Okay, knight g3, bishop e6, knight c7 is checkmated in 1 move. Shockingly, a 25-40 rated GM sees that and now gets checked and has to lose his rook in the corner. Wait, are we gonna have a draw? No, but he also doesn't take the rook. He doesn't take the rook in the corner because knight e2 check wins the rook for black. You probably forgot about this knight, right? You're probably like, oh, white has an attack, right? Because you're selfish, you're not looking at what your opponent wants. The only move here for white is king h2 if he wants to keep the game going. So that knight e2 is not a fork. Instead of that, he moves his rook, and now black has knight g6. He plays knight c6, also better, and gets the pawn back, and now black is the one playing this position for a win. This is completely nuts, all right? Knight g6, here comes knight g4. The pieces are getting traded. All Lagarde has here is getting this to an endgame somehow by some magic, all right? He gets into some sort of endgame. The problem is there's a major difference right now between these two players. One of them has a pony. The other one does not have a pony, and that pony proves decisive after 46 moves, as you just can't defend the rest of your pawns. A crazy final game between France and Lithuania, and Paulius is also having an amazing event. He's gained like 25 rating points, so shout out to Lithuania. I've had a few of you request their games many times already, and yeah, that concludes round 10, folks. Insane round. I'll see you tomorrow for the gold medal match. And before we sign off, are there pairings? There's no pairings yet. No, they have not been uploaded to chess results. You can check pairings. There's links in the description. I'll see you tomorrow. Get out of here.